Hello, everyone, and happy World Kindness Day. Welcome to another episode of the Tim and Jim Show, where we talk about all things marketing, entrepreneurship, and PR to grow your business. And I'm excited to be here with my co-host and guest today. I couldn't be among more kind people on the Tim and Jim Show today. Jim, how are you doing this week?
Well, I'm feeling extremely kind, and especially knowing that Ken is an Apple user, and that we had some kind comments about that. And excited to be here and learn about apps for business because I think it's a very important subject. And so, Tim, why don't you go ahead and tell us more about Ken?
So Ken, out of full disclosure, is a client of mine. He is a rocket scientist turned software and app developer. But Ken, why don't you tell us more about yourself and what you do?
First of all, I'd just like to say I'm feeling kind of good to be here. Thank you. Thank you. And we do need to be kind to everyone, including Android users like Tim.
Oh, we are not going there.
So, as Tim said, I used to be a rocket scientist. And my wife is always quick to point out the used to be part. So she says, you're not anymore. I used to work for the Department of the Navy and designed all sorts of cool things that basically, as I put it to Tim on Veterans Day, I used to serve those who served and gave them the tools they need to do their jobs. So a lot of the software, I did both electronic and computer hardware, but the software was kind of like software that would run, you kind of think like your microwave or something, deep in the bowels of a system that nobody would ever see how it worked. So I retired in 2013 and started my software business. And writing apps is like at the total other end of the spectrum because people are touching them and pressing buttons and tapping and all that. And there's, a user interface to it. So that's taken a little bit of getting used to. And I've had to learn a lot of new things. I've learned 2 new computer programming languages. And really, it just keeps my mind sharp in retirement because I'm just not the type to sit around all day. Well, actually, I do sit around all day, but it's in front of my computer programming.
So we want to thank all of you for watching. We appreciate all your support. And we also want to encourage you guys to post your questions down there for Ken. And we are streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. So hello to everybody in all of those places. And we want to encourage you guys also to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So just search for the Tim and Jim Show on YouTube and hit the bell. And so you guys receive notifications every time we go live on YouTube. So Jim, do you want to start us off with question number 1 today?
Yeah. So Ken, I know there's a lot of people that are always wondering, when should a business really consider having their own app as opposed to, say, maybe all these apps that are already out there?
Well, that's a great question. I think first of all, I gave this some thought that a business that has a lot of products that they're selling, that's a good place to start. And those products don't have to be, fancy or anything. A great example that I like to use is the local Sheets app, where you order food and they've got all their menu items. So, fries may not be the most exciting product, but they certainly are delicious. So, but it really helps to tame their menu and make things easier for their customers. It streamlines their operations as well. So I think services, on the other hand, don't necessarily really lend themselves that well to apps. I think having a website that lists your services and provide a contact form and ways to get in touch with you, I think that's really sufficient. But once you've got a number of products that you're selling, it may make sense to set up your own online store as an app.
Cool.
The other thing I would mention is that really the real measure is, will it help your customers? Will it improve their online or shopping experience with you? That's the real reason to do it.
And also, would you say, Ken, that aside from that, could you see where an app could be beneficial, maybe just for internal use, as opposed to, it might help you track things better in some aspects? Because, especially like we've talked about with Apple, a lot of times you can go cross-platform. And so having an app where you can input one place and it'll sync somewhere else, I could see that being beneficial as well.
Absolutely. The ability to do things across different platforms, whether that would be, say, your watch or your iPhone, translate to your iPad or even your desktop, and to be able to hand those things off. But the thing is, not all of those screens work equally well for doing what you're trying to do with your business. The watch screen especially is incredibly small, whereas an iPad or an iPad Pro is really more on par with what you would be able to do with a desktop. So, excuse me. I think that it depends on what you're trying to do with that app. Is it something really simple? Then maybe the watch is a great choice. Is it something more complicated? Maybe you need a little more screen real estate to do that. But you're absolutely right.
And we want to thank Robert Brand for watching. He says, "Hey guys," over on Facebook. Hey Robert, thanks for being here.
And Rob has a great show. You should make sure you go check him out. On I think he's been using StreamYard, and I know he also streams to YouTube. Very very educational, informative, and I enjoy watching his show.
Likewise, same here. So Ken, you talked about this a little bit. Do apps work best for certain kinds of businesses? You were saying maybe not so great for service-based businesses, but are there certain ones that you would encourage it for?
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick glance at my notes here. I think for a lot of businesses, loyalty is a big factor. So being able to track, really, it comes down on the business side to gather business intelligence. Know where your customers are going, how many times they come, and how often, and all that sort of thing. So a loyalty app is definitely something that works on all those different devices and provides value to your customers, assuming you're offering them some sort of savings or coupons or something like that.
Right. I remember using a loyalty app a number of years ago. There's a local store here called the River Market, and they used to use an app called Belly, Belly, like your tummy. And it was the whole loyalty idea where you would, buy so much in products, and then you would get a coffee like every $50 you spend, or every $1 million you spend, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those loyalty apps are basically, at least as far as the user is concerned, basically just an app version of one of those little scan cards that, they would scan, okay, you were here today and you got credit for today's visit, and you're so many visits away from your free cup of coffee. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you see a lot of that. I know my wife, as an example, has a Kohl's account and has a Kohl's app. And if you use the app, sometimes you get coupons that you wouldn't get otherwise. It lets you pay your balance, check your balance if you have a card. A lot of these, it seems like too, a lot of the point of sale systems are building in this loyalty app type process as well, where, like you said, if you give up your phone number, so it's kind of like they're gathering data on you. And they're able to text you if you opt in. I can text you specials. So yeah, it's really, I definitely see where it's helping with those places where you go visit, especially storefronts.
Absolutely, and we definitely should talk about the flip side of these apps. At least what do I see are the responsibilities of the people who are making that app in terms of, or providing that app, because I think it's important that you respect your customers, and if you don't, I think that's going to work against you. Just another kind of app that works really well. It's very simple and transactional. I've been using one at a restaurant, and a number of them are doing this now. It's not quite Apple Pay, where it's just you can use your Apple Wallet, but you sign in. If you go to a restaurant enough, you can put your credit card information into their account, and you can check out really fast. So you don't have to have your server here's your bill, take your card, run the card, bring the paper back, sign the paper, put the tip and all that. You do it all right from your mobile phone, and you can be in and out. Not that that's necessarily always your goal, but why take longer on taking care of the paperwork than you have to?
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I recall and I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but we went to one where they basically had it on the table. You could check out. Now you swiped your card at the table, which was interesting as well, but then you didn't have to wait for the waiter or waitress to come back. So yeah, that's I don't know how I feel about giving up my card to another person.
Well, and that really brings us to those kind of responsibilities. But before we talk about the responsibilities of the business, one thing I think we should talk about is, do you really need an app? Because there are a lot of cases where a business says, hey, I need an app. Why? Because my competitors have an app. So I got to keep up with them and or surpass them, because I'm going to be the first one in this market to have an app. But a lot of times, I guess a statistic I found recently is that obviously mobile is king. So a lot of people aren't using desktop computers. iPads are kind of niche in terms of consumption as well. People are using their phones, whether they be an iPhone or a wonderful Android. So there you go. Represent. So one of the things that you need to ask yourself is, could my app in fact be just a website? And obviously, to do that website, it would have to be a responsive website, one that takes advantage of and flows, if you will, with the device it's on. So it takes advantage of the larger screen size if you're on, say, an iPad, and condenses things down in a reasonable way for your browser in the phone.
Sure.
So it's possible that your app doesn't need anything more than a browser. But the statistic I just looked up said that 90% of interaction on mobile devices is in fact through apps. 10% is through the browser. So that's kind of a sobering statistic that says, people aren't necessarily using the browser to do their work on the phone.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Ken, because a lot of times, as important as websites are to our businesses, especially for having content and allowing people to check us out, if you really think about where a lot of people spend their time, it's on these social apps, as an example, because they're able to communicate and do other things. But to sit there and have to type in a browser name, or even a lot of times if you search, you might even search just by, asking Google or asking Siri, and they'll give you an answer.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Typing is I don't know, maybe I'm extremely old school, but I have the worst time typing on a small screen phone. And in fact, the restaurant that I was talking about, their first implementation of that app, though, was web-based, and it was through the browser. And then as they got the back end of their system working, they transitioned the front end over to an app. And I guess that brings me to the point about, do you need an app? Because a lot of times the app that people are thinking about is really just a gateway to much bigger things going on in the background. So at very least, unless you have the most simple app in the world, you're going to need a database. You're going to need authentication of your users. You're going to need to take care of data integrity, privacy issues, backups, availability, reliability, really, to make sure that your app is truly available at all times when people need it. And I'm sure we've all had experiences with mobile apps that just when you need, I've had it happen to me at the gas pump. Either it asked me suddenly for my password. It's really not the best time to do this while I'm trying to pump gas, or worse yet, just not be available. So there's really a lot to making these apps work. That's why I talk about first simple apps, because they kind of get you going. But you still need, even for a loyalty app, you need a database, and you need a server, and you need all the things that go with that. So even the simplest of ones actually have more going on behind the scenes than most people think.
Sure. So we were talking a bit before about mobile and a browser versus an app. So Jim, do you want to ask this question?
So when should you have a mobile versus a desktop app, Ken?
Well, basically, I think mobile is absolutely the way to go. You need an app for mobile because, like we just said, that there's only 10% of the activity happening in a browser. The other problem with mobile is that the browser has to be one size fits all in terms of its capabilities. But if, for instance, you're implementing your own store, e-commerce site or whatever, you may very well want to tailor your interface to your specific store and make things as they appear to the user on their interface work better with your back end. Whereas the browser just provides, here's a back button, here's an X button, here's a refresh button. Whereas if you have the app, you can put the controls in there that you want. Now, as far as desktop, the browser is really the way to go, because you have a lot of real estate to make that interface work. And quite frankly, there's probably crickets chirping as far as the number of people who access your site through the desktop at this point. But it's still important. Let's take Apple as an example. I shop, even on my iPad, I shop Apple through the website. They do have an Apple Store app, and that's designed to streamline things, to make it easier for those smaller iPads and iPhone users to get the stuff they need, because most of us are doing it out in public. I can't believe that. And they've got their phone, and they're using their thumb, they're scrolling, and they're tapping buttons. So it is really, the mobile is the way to go.
And I find it fascinating too, though. You brought up a great point that I don't think people consider, is when you have that app as a business, is that back end aspect that you're going to also potentially need to make things work. And I could see where that could become something that, if they don't take proper planning in that could turn into a real nightmare.
Absolutely. So that's why it may be best to crawl before you walk and use a responsive website with a a pre-existing e-commerce vendor that provides you that store interface. And that's a great way to start. But as you move along your journey, you can take more and more of that infrastructure into your own control. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't try to start there unless it was for something simple.
Sure. Ken, could you just explain to people, if there's some people in our audience who don't know what a responsive website is, what does that mean?
Sure. It takes the same content that is intended for that web page, but it adapts it to the screen that you're looking at. And a lot of early on desktop interfaces looked really, even when they were responsive, they were bad on a cell phone screen because they were trying to cram too much content in such a small space. So now you're looking at desktop sites that actually look a lot more like mobile because that's what's really being targeted. But that responsiveness allows you to tailor the same content to different devices. And responsive is absolutely positively necessary for doing mobile on mobile websites on phones.
Sure. So once again, thank you all for watching. We're here with Ken Johnson of 8AC Systems, talking about apps for your business. So, and let us know if you have any questions down below in the comments. Ken, what kind of investment does it take to have an app created for your business? I would imagine it's all over the board depending on a bunch of factors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the kind of different levels of apps. Okay, so basically, for the tiniest of apps, you're talking maybe $5,000 to $10,000.
Okay.
I won't specifically name the type of app, but let's say for $5,000 you get a button that when you press it, it makes a sound on your phone. We all know what that first app was. Not particularly useful, but you don't get much for $5,000 to $10,000. I hate to say that. A small app, such as maybe the loyalty app, where you still need a database, servers, and all that sort of thing, and some way to identify your users, really even basically, is still probably about $50,000.
Okay.
A typical app of a couple features, and this is per platform. So iPhone and iPad may be one platform, maybe they're two separate platforms, depending if you want to make it truly tailored to the experience. And obviously Android is another platform, the watch would be another platform. So typically you're talking about $100,000 to $250,000 for that app. And I wish the news was better. I mean, I kind of guessed this was going to be a big question on your show. And I really wish I had better news for people out there listening.
Well, and Ken, another thing along that lines, because I worked, I wouldn't say I worked with a company, but I was part of a group that it was a kind of like a sports app that they were attempting to release the full-blown version, and they couldn't get through Apple's security, I guess, scrutiny. So just because you have an app doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get approved to be on these phone systems. And I think that's another thing people have to be aware of.
Absolutely, and that was one of the. I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the caveats I wanted to mention, because that is really a big risk. Now, I myself right now, I have not done any iOS or now iPad OS apps. I do Macintosh, and one of the reasons is I'm very desktop centric, but the other reason is it's a lot more freedom. So you could pay somebody, invest all this money to have them develop an app for you, then get it submitted to Apple, for instance, or Google for Android, and you could have them, just like you said, Jim, flat out reject it and say, this violates some term or policy. And I don't want to say it's capricious, but if you do your research, you may come to that conclusion. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of apps that make it through this process, but it really is that you are relying on Apple to validate you and say, yeah, we're going to allow you to put this on our devices. And, that's just to me is for where I am with my business, too big of a risk. With Macintosh, I can make an app, people can download it from my website and then install it without too much trouble. It still has to go through a notarization process and all that, but at least Apple doesn't have a say in what people are putting on their Macs too much. But really, really good point. Now, the thing that drives those prices up, and that is just for the app. Okay, so you're talking about the front end. That really doesn't. So that's why a simple app we can talk about in those terms. But you still have, for most apps, that back end processing of computers that is actually running the show or running the store, for instance. When I place my order through the Sheets app, I mean, that's just an interface as far as the user is concerned. Sheets has to have all the computing power to know what to do with the data, route that data to the correct store, and get it to the people actually making the delicious Sheets food. Love you, Sheets. So,
you're full of jokes today, Ken. I like it.
Oh, well, I try to bring a little levity. In fact, the other thing I thought about with doing this show is I thought, the only thing the internet really needs is more of me.
Absolutely.
More of me on it. Yeah. That was the last thing. But anyway, I don't want to, like I say, I don't want to scare people away, but the devil and a bird in the hand kind of statements apply. So start out absolutely as simply as you can go, because things just grow exponentially from that point. The other thing that you need to ask yourself, not only do you have to be able to afford to develop the app, not only do you have to take the risk about getting the app approved, you have to maintain it. With every new operating system update, your app could go stale. Your app could stop working on certain operating system versions. So you're going to pay somewhere between 10 and, what do I have here? 15 to 25% of the initial development costs per year to maintain that. So it's a commitment. It's not a one and done kind of thing.
And I think you bring up some great points, Ken. I mean, it really, I think sometimes, and I definitely think there's a place for business apps. It's that shiny object thing. It's like you brought up earlier that like, oh, well, my competitor has an app, so I must need one too. Well, one, do you really know if that app's working for your competitor? Two, the cost involved. And are there other things that you're overlooking? Things as simple as having Google My Business and using the powers
Absolutely.
of what Google will let you do to get that information. I mean, you can schedule if that's part of what you're wanting to do, but also like one of the examples you gave us before the show of how somebody was using an app to really improve the customer experience. And maybe that's sometimes what people should be looking at if they don't have a better way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just, I can't think of something better than the menu ordering system on that app. It allows me to save my favorites. So once I say, hey, this is something I order all the time, I put a little, hit the little heart button and it says great. And I can come back and reorder that again. That's why I say, really, it comes down to, are you providing value to your customers through your app? And if you are, that's worth it.
Right. So, Ken, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Ken, how can people find out more information about you and your business?
I'm on the web with a great site designed by Sohn Social Media Solutions. It's at 8acsystems.com. That's the number 8, the letter A, the letter C, systems.com. You can also reach me by old-fashioned telephone 570-266-9108, or my email is kbjohnson. I'm sorry, KBJ at 8acsystems.com. That's KBJ at 8acsystems. Thanks so much.
And you're on Twitter. I see you on Twitter.
Yes, I'm well connected on social media now, and I'm very happy about that. And I do agree with you, Jim, that if you're starting out, especially, and thinking of an app, try to use those free or low-cost tools to your benefit, because once you can't just put your toe in the water with an app. You've got to dive into the deep end of the pool.
So Jim, do you want to tell people who we have on next week?
Yes, excited to have Sabrina Cadini, and she's going to be talking about life-work balance. And Sabrina is a teammate of mine on the Twitter Smarter Chat, which is every Thursday at 1. And she's just a very bright energy type of person. So especially here on Kindness Day, I think it's appropriate that we talk about the fact that we're going to have Sabrina on next week, and looking forward to having her. And has been really great to have Ken on today. Ken, thank you. Some great knowledge that you shared with our audience. And so if people are looking for apps, I think one thing you showed them is that if they talk to you, they're going to get the truth, and you're not going to steer them in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Why, certainly. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Be kind.